Welcome to CFN Media. I'm John Veneri, and the question is, who are these fundamentalists that he's talking about? On November 30th, just a few days ago, Pope Francis gave another informal interview with journalists on flight, on board a plane, going from Africa back to Rome. It's another episode of the off-the-cuff remarks to journalists. And here Francis condemned fundamentalist Catholics, so that's what he called them. A lot of Catholics got upset, rightly so. And we're going to talk about it. Here's what he said. He said fundamentalism is a sickness. Now I need to tell you, first of all, that this was reported by the National Catholic Reporter, by the Vatican webpage, by other journalists who were on flight, and also LifeSite News posted the entire video where you can see and hear Francis saying these things. So this is not a misrepresentation. But I'll quote him. He says, fundamentalism is a sickness that is in all religions. We Catholics have some, not some, many, who believe in the absolute truth and go ahead dirtying the other with calumny, with disinformation, and doing evil. They do evil, said Francis. I say this because it is my church. We have to combat it. Religious fundamentalism is not religious, he says, because it lacks God. It is idolatry, like the idolatry of money. And he went on to speak, of course, about Mohammedanism and his friendship with Islam, and he says you cannot cancel out a religion because there are some groups and many groups in a certain point of history who are fundamentalists. Okay, but I'm not going to be talking about what he has to say about Islam. I want to answer this question. Who are these fundamentalists that he's talking about? Now, before I do this, I want to make an initial observation, and that is, it's just a simple principle, that only those who have a talent for speaking off the cuff should speak off the cuff. And Francis has no talent for this. What we get from him is an avalanche of verbiage, of reckless generalizations that end up leaving causing good Catholics to argue with one another about what he really means. See, this is not the mark of competent leadership. But again, the question, who are these Catholic fundamentalists that he is warning against? And remember, he says there are many. Now, in order to answer this, you have to be familiar with the neo-modernist literature that has circulated as a result of the Council over the past decades. Because in this literature, it is always the traditional Catholic who is denounced as an integralist. It is the traditional Catholic who is denounced as a fundamentalist. I'm going to give you two examples. Back in 2003, Catholic Family News, we were warning against this new interfaith pan-religious orientation, kind of a Spirit of Assisi orientation that was being introduced at the shrine at Fatima. And we even warned this type of thing was going to happen, and it did, that in 2004, I believe that was the year, there was a Hindu ritual that took place inside the Fatima Chapel. Now, of course, Catholic Family News, we spoke up against this outrage, and when we did, there was a Franciscan brother who attacked us in a Fatima newspaper. That's a newspaper in Fatima, and he called us Taliban Catholics. Rigid, anachronistic, in other words, rigid, anachronistic fundamentalists. Now, the second example is even more striking. It demonstrates what the conciliar Catholic means when they call us, or they use the term, by the way, I should say, when they use the term fundamentalists. Now, this example comes from a little-known Rome-based journal, Catholic journal in name, called CDIC. It's an Italian acronym, and it's the English title of this group is the International Jewish Catholic Documentation Service. Now, this journal and the association itself, I'm quoting now from their literature, was founded in Rome in 1965 at the request of a group of experts of the Second Vatican Council following the promulgation of Nostra Aetate to promote Jewish Catholic dialogue. Okay, so this is an ecumenical journal. Now, in 1999, they published a special issue on the subject. I'm quoting the headline that was on the magazine, Fundamentalism and Extremism, Challenges for the 21st Century. And the entire issue, it was a survey of those within various religious groups who reject ecumenism, including those from Judaism, those from Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism. So we can see this is something that's across all religions, and we see too Francis echoing this when he says fundamentalism is a sickness that is in all religions. Cedic pointed to, in the Protestant area, they pointed to Ian Paisley, the Presbyterian Ian Paisley, as someone who is opposed to ecumenism. And under the heading, I'm quoting now, Integralism and Fundamentalism, Christians Confronting Ecumenism, the magazine spotlighted as the central figure who opposes ecumenism inside the Catholic Church, they spotlight, surprise, surprise, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Now, listen to this. Listen to what they say. This is an amazing admission. It talks about the reasons for Archbishop Lefebvre's refusal to accept ecumenism. I'm going to read directly from the magazine, what the magazine said. I'm quoting now. Lefebvre's refusal to accept ecumenism originates in the clear teaching of the Magisterium, the encyclical Sadis Cognitum of Leo XIII, 1896, the encyclical Mortalium Animus of Pius XI, 1928, the December 20th, 1949 instruction of the Holy Office regarding ecumenism. The only ecumenism accepted by Lefebvre and his followers is that which strives for the unconditional return of the members of other confessions to the one true Church of Christ, the Roman Catholic Church. This hardened sectarianism is precisely the kind of logic which Vatican II, through profound reflection on the nature of the Church, refused to accept. Though rooted in tradition, it says, the scope of the Council's reflection was without precedent in the history of Christianity. For integralists, ecumenism is one of the fundamental betrayals by Vatican II. That's a close quote. That's a direct quote. Now, let's take a look at what's revealed here. First, the Ecumenical Journal admits openly that Lefebvre rejected the Council's ecumenism because it contradicted what they called the clear magisterium of the centuries, and they even cite the papal documents by name. Second, it admits that Vatican II effectively refused to accept the Catholic position that it is necessary for the non-Catholic to convert to the one true Church for salvation. And third, it admits that Vatican II's approach in this regard is without precedent in the history of the Church. It's not rooted in tradition, as they claim. It's without precedent. It is what St. Vincent of Lawrence would call it a lying novelty. Pius X would call it profane novelty of words and the gainsay of knowledge falsely so called. See? So Archbishop Lefebvre and those Catholics like him, they reject this lying novelty, and this is their crime. It is what I call the crime of fidelity. It is fidelity to what the Catholic Church always taught by the perennial magisterium, and the magazine calls this a hardened sectarianism. It calls this fundamentalism. And now, as the conciliar revolution proceeds, and in the light of the recent synod, we see this in another context. Those who, we've just experienced this, those who, say, insist that a divorced and remarried Catholic may not receive communion without confession and amendment of life, this is now regarded as doctrinal rigidity. This is Phariseeism. This is a hardened sectarianism. To hold what the Church taught and practice in this regard is to fall into the category of fundamentalism. And that's what this Ecumenical Catholic article calls us, integralists and fundamentalists, and Francis is using the term fundamentalist in the exact same manner. Now, to wrap this up, I want to close by looking at the other things that he said. These crimes are crimes according to how Francis sees them. He says we accept absolute truth, we dirty others with calumny, we spread disinformation, and we do evil. So what's he talking about here? I think actually when you see it from the modernist standpoint, it's actually easy to understand. First, we accept absolute truth. We are deprecated for rejecting the modernist claim that truth changes over time, which is an error promoted constantly by the pestilential Cardinal Casper, one of Pope Francis's favorite theologians. So now it is suddenly a crime to accept absolute truth, that is, objective truth, that is the immovable standard for everything else. Okay, so that's first, absolute truth. Next, we dirty others with calumny. Now here's how you have to see it from the modernist point of view. See, if you're a modernist and you believe that certain aspects of pastoral practice or doctrinal definitions or the Catholic language of the centuries, if you believe this all needs to change in order to fit modern circumstances, in order to accommodate the needs of the people of the moment, even if the practical result of this is the contradiction of doctrine, and when someone calls you out on this as a betrayal of the faith, or someone calls you out on this saying that this defies divine law, that's what Archbishop Schneider said about the Pope Francis's working document for 2015. It defies divine law. So someone calls you out for betraying the faith, you're going to regard this as calumny. You're going to see this as someone spreading disinformation about you. This isn't true. I'm a good Catholic. And we know this because, remember, Pius X said this in his encyclical about modernism. What did he say? He says that modernists are shocked. Shocked. They are, I'm quoting him now, they are astonished that we should number them amongst the enemies of the church. Moi, an enemy of the church? But he says, okay, for anyone who knows the faith, no one will be reasonably surprised when we do so. But to call them out for betraying the faith, they will regard that as calumny and spreading disinformation. And finally, if you're a modernist and you hold to the false view of compassion, that it is an unjust act of discrimination and exclusion to refuse communion to the divorced and remarried Catholic, which is the exact tenet advanced by the rootin' tootin' Cardinal Martini of Milan, again, one of Pope Francis's favorite theologians. He publicly called Martini a father for the whole church. Then those Catholics, if this is what you are, this is the program you want to advance, this so-called program, then those Catholics who oppose your compassionate overtures of inclusion are doing evil. So make no mistake about it, those who hold to the integrity of the Catholic faith of all time, and those who oppose the modernist destructive program, we are the fundamentalists that Francis deprecates. In his eyes, we who hold, as Cedic says, to the clear teaching of the magisterium, we are the hardened sectarians that must be opposed. But we need not worry. Bishop Sheen used to say that God has his day, the devil has his hour. And we are now in the hour of the triumph of Vatican II. We are now in the hour of the radical Bergoglian papacy. And neither of these will last forever. So, all of these cheap insults should serve to strengthen our resolve to maintain the Catholic faith in this time of Bergoglian upheaval, to advance the Catholic faith in its integrity to all those who are in our sphere of influence, especially to those who are disheartened and confused, and to publicly resist the modernist toxin now coming from the highest echelons of the Church. For Catholic Family News, CFN Media, I'm John Veneri. See you next time.